Okay, so imagine this. You're walking through Manila, right? Like you're right there on the street. And bam, these huge walls just kind of appear. That's Fort Santiago.
You got it! And today we're taking you way deeper into this place than any tour guide ever could.
Right. It's more than just a cool photo opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. This place has seen it all. We're talking conquests, rebellions, really the making of the Philippines as we know it. Centuries of stories within these walls.
It's got to give me chills just thinking about it. Our source, Discover Fort Santiago, Philippines, says they started building this thing in 1590. Like, can you imagine?
It's almost hard to grasp, isn't it?
It's like back when Shakespeare was writing his plays.
Exactly. And it was a strategic move by the Spanish, too. They needed to protect their trade routes, so this fort, it was a big deal. High stakes.
Wow. Speaking of big deals, our source mentions Jose Rizal, the Philippines' national hero.
Right. Imprisoned and executed at Fort Santiago itself.
Yeah. But they call him a forgotten figure, which seems kind of strange for a national hero.
Yeah, that struck me as odd too. How can a national hero be forgotten?
Maybe it depends who's telling the story. Whose history gets remembered.
That's such an important point. History is never simple. It's told from different sides with different perspectives.
Okay, so I always thought of forts as, fort-like. Big walls for defense. But the way they describe Fort Santiago, it's like beautiful too.
Oh, it's much more than just brute force. Discover Fort Santiago, Philippines mentions all these ornate stone carvings and elements of Baroque design. Is fascinating.
And those crenellated walls, what even is that?
You know those gaps you see in castle walls in movies? Where archers would shoot from?
Yeah.
That's crenellation. So yeah, Fort Santiago. Beautiful and deadly, form and function.
I love that. Form and function. So it's not just one style of architecture though, right?
Right. Our source points out that you've got this amazing mix of Spanish, American, even Filipino styles all blended together.
Oh, really?
Yep. It shows how much the Philippines culture has been shaped by different influences over time. It's like the building itself tells a story about the mixing of cultures. Yeah. And if you were to walk through those sections built during Rizal's time, you can practically feel that connection to his story.
That's incredible, like looking at layers of history all in one place. Makes you just want to hop on a plane and see it for yourself.
Absolutely. And speaking of visiting Fort Santiago, our source actually has some pretty good tips for anyone planning a trip.
Okay, so let's say you've convinced me. I'm booking a flight to the Philippines right now. What kind of insider tips does Discover Fort Santiago, Philippines give to make the most of a visit?
Well, first things first, be ready for some serious heat.
Oh yeah, I bet.
They really stress planning your trip for the morning or late afternoon. Avoid that midday sun.
Makes sense. I wouldn't want to be passing out from heat stroke when I'm trying to appreciate history.
Exactly. And comfortable shoes are a must. You'll be doing a ton of walking around the fort.
Okay, noted. Now, what about food? Any good spots to grab a bite at the fort itself?
So they do mention limited options inside Fort Santiago, but they highly recommend checking out the local cuisine.
Now we're talking. What are some must-try dishes for a first-timer like me?
Well, they specifically call out adobo and sinigang and street food stalls. That's where you'll find the real deal.
Ooh, street food. Love it. Adds to that authentic experience. Oh, and they mentioned something about nightlife nearby.
Yeah. Apparently, there's this district, Malate, known for its vibrant nightlife.
Cool. So you can get your history fix during the day and then experience modern Filipino culture at night. This whole forgotten figure thing about Jose Rizal really stuck with me. It's just weird. I mean, he's on your money. Surely people haven't forgotten him.
It is strange, right? You've got his image on the peso, his writings in schools, he's considered a national hero. But then there's this suggestion that some aspects of him, of his story, aren't talked about. Makes you wonder what else is hidden, what we might be missing.
Yeah, like were there attempts to maybe downplay parts of his life? Or even erase them altogether?
It's definitely possible, especially if his ideas were seen as a threat at the time.
Right, like his writings, they were considered pretty radical back then, weren't they?
They were, so maybe what we celebrate now, those ideas, they weren't always so popular.
And that could explain why our source called him a forgotten figure.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that even our heroes, they're complex. Their legacies have layers, and sometimes those layers contradict each other.
It's amazing to me that a place like Fort Santiago, it's been there for centuries. And yet there are still these hidden stories just waiting to be uncovered.
Totally. It shows that history isn't just some fixed thing in the past. It's always changing, always being reinterpreted as we learn more.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I gotta say, this deep dive has been quite the ride. From architecture and street food to, like, questioning what we think we know about heroes. And it all started with just this one source: discover Fort Santiago, Philippines. Who knew?
That's the beauty of it, right? One place, one story can open up so many different paths to explore.
Definitely. So to everyone listening, if this whole forgotten figure thing got you thinking, maybe it's time to do some digging of your own. Look at Jose Rizal with fresh eyes. Question what you thought you knew about him, about that time period.
Exactly. Who had the power then? Whose voices were silenced? Those questions matter.
They do. It reminds us that history is full of surprises, and that even the most famous stories have layers and layers beneath the surface. So yeah, next time you hear about some big historical figure, especially hero, don't be afraid to, poke around a bit. You never know what you might find. And that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for exploring with us, and we'll catch you next time.